That's a great question. Do individual banks really create money out of nothing? Now, there are a lot of texts, mainly in academia, that describe a process whereby every time a bank originates a loan, it simultaneously creates a deposit, if you like. So in other words, it creates money. Every time it writes a loan to a customer, it has created money. Now, this is an ongoing debate about money creation, the role of banks, money creation. We're not going to have this debate on this video, but what I wanted to do was take that question and answer it at the level of the individual bank. At the level of the individual bank, and I say this because obviously at the market-wide level, if I was looking at the planet Earth from Mars, by definition, every loan is mirrored with a deposit, by definition. Because in order to lend money to someone, you need someone to have that money to lend it to that person. So every loan is mirrored with a deposit. At the level of the planet, I suppose one could make an argument or state that yes, money creation is taking place. Money creation is taking place because the supply of money is not finite. As we've seen, the money supply has been increasing steadily as long as money has been used in markets. But I want to answer that question from the point of view of the individual bank. When an individual bank lends money to somebody, it does have to be able to fund that loan. It's got to be able to fund it. It can't just write a piece of paper that has on it £100 and then give that piece of paper to someone and say, there's your £100 loan. It's got to be able to fund it. The balance sheet has got to balance. Now, some people say, well, the balance sheet balances, that's why I've created money. It's double entry. But at the operational level of the individual bank, if I can't obtain the funding for that loan, I'm going to fall over. That's what happened to Northern Rock in 2007. So at the individual level, the funding of that loan can only come from a discrete number of sources. The first and most obvious one is a customer deposit. A customer deposits £100 with me. I take that £100 and I lend it to a borrowing customer. So I've funded the loan with a deposit. But I don't have to have the deposit to make the loan. I could lend my borrowing customer my own money, shareholders' funds. So we've set up the bank with £100 worth of shares, £1, 100 shares, each of £1. I've set up the bank with £100 of share capital. No customer has given me any deposits yet, but I take £10 of that share capital and I lend it to someone. So I've funded the loan with my own funds. That's a second source. The third source is non-customer, but from someone else. Let's call that capital markets or wholesale funding, institutional funding. I could borrow money from an institutional investor or from the capital markets, the wholesale markets. Perhaps I could issue a certificate of deposit to the money markets or a medium-term note to the capital markets. I could borrow that money and I could lend that money that I borrowed to the borrowing customer. And then there's a fourth source of funds, which is the central bank. These days, one or two central banks around the world are part of almost the business as usual funding base of a bank. They have a number of funding schemes that enable banks to borrow from them, from the central bank, as part of their normal business. So there's four discrete sources of funds, and a bank's got to be able to obtain funding from one or more of those sources. If it doesn't, it can't make the loan. If it can't borrow from the wholesale markets or from a deposit customer or from the central bank or use the money of its own money, its shareholders' funds, it won't be able to lend the money to its borrowing customer. And anyone who doesn't think that's the case should go along to a treasury desk of any bank in the world and see what happens if they can't obtain the funding to cover a loan. They wouldn't be able to originate the loan. So at the individual level of the bank, I'm afraid I don't think that banks actually create money, not at the individual level. At the market-wide level, and this is something that an Oxford Don once showed me on a piece of paper, when I lend money to somebody, that person takes my money and puts it in his bank or her bank. So they've got a deposit. And at the two bank levels, I've created money. And I don't want to go into that explanation. It was very convincing and very elegantly put. But at the individual bank level, I can't just create money. I've got to fund the loan. And like I said, if you don't agree with me on that, just go along and sit in a treasury desk of a bank, a regular plain vanilla commercial bank, and see what happens if we weren't able to obtain the funding. We wouldn't be able to originate the loan. Okay, that's a potentially controversial subject, so I'm going to stop there on that one. Thank you for watching this video. Please have a look at my YouTube channel and subscribe and watch the videos on that one. I'm sure you'll enjoy them. Thank you.